Way back in 1996, Rare announced that they were working on an upcoming game entitled Project Dream, featuring a boy adventurer with a sword in a distant land raided with pirates. The game was scheduled for release on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Soon later, the game was planned for release on the Nintendo 64. In an interview with Rareware Archives in 2010, Project Dream's lead music composer Grant Kirkhope revealed that over 90 songs had been composed for the game. The game included voice acting, but unfortunately, the game wouldn't fit onto a 64-bit cartridge. Plans were dropped for Project Dream, and the sword-wielding boy was transformed from a human to a rabbit, and finally into a bear. The title would soon arise at E3 1997 entitled Banjo Kazooie, a next-gen platformer for the Nintendo 64. The platformer was revolutionised with the launch of Super Mario 64 alongside Nintendo's new 64-bit console, meaning that any platforming game that dares challenge Mario for the crown would have to be nothing short of epic. However, Rare had proven in the past that they could achieve gaming perfection with games such as the infamously difficult Battletoads, the stunning Donkey Kong Country series, and the mother to all 3D first-person shooters, GoldenEye. Up until Banjo Kazooie's launch, the game received a huge amount of hype, and it was widely believed, looking at screenshots of the game, that it was going to be a Super Mario 64 clone, focusing solely on collecting gold objects in bright colourful worlds using a hub to access all the levels. Banjo Kazooie was scheduled to be released in the winter of 1997 alongside Diddy Kong Racing, but the production was far from complete. Instead, Banjo was incorporated as a playable character into the racing game, but wouldn't step into the spotlight solo until June the following year. After sleeping in on the day Banjo was supposed to take his sister Tooty on an adventure, the antagonist Gruntilda steals Tooty and kidnaps her in her lair. Gruntilda would then use a machine that would transfer Grunty's hideousness with Tooty's beauty, resulting in Banjo's sister as a monster. Like most platform games of yore, and even today, the story within a platformer is ultimately the smallest detail of the game, but with Banjo Kazooie's humorous animation and shiny colours, it felt like a breath of fresh air. The story was simply go and save the girl. Gruntilda's lair would act as the game's world hub, but overall it was a level within itself containing, like every other level in the game, 10 jigsaw pieces to collect. The lair was broken down into segments that were separated from each other with magical note doors that wouldn't open until the right amount of musical notes had been collected. Each segment of the lair had access to different worlds, which would be opened by finishing a jigsaw puzzle on the wall. Access was then granted and Banjo was free to explore all the different worlds the hub had to offer. The lair seemed to have a built-in intercom system in place, as Gruntilda would often mock Banjo and his companion whilst exploring into further sections. This helped give the lair much more atmosphere and added even more comedy to the laughs. The lair was also home to Gruntilda's sister Brentilda, who would spill Grunty's dirty little secrets to you, and a talking book named Cheeto, who would enlighten Banjo with cheat codes. These codes would then be entered at Sandcastle 4 in the Treasure Trove Cove level. For example, give the bear lots of air would award Banjo with unlimited air. Each level had its own distinctive feel, offering new enemies, music and difficulty level. The 9 levels would include the likes of Freezy Peak, a snow level centred by a giant snowman, the haunting Mad Monster Mansion and Clicklock Wood, which Banjo could change the season for different weather effects on the environment. The levels when in comparison with Mario 64 were massive. This is one of the few times when the saying less is more is highly relevant. All of the levels were highly detailed and each one of them had a bunch of different characters to interact with. One in particular character, Gobby the Camel, is freed in Gobby's Valley and would then make his way into Clicklock Wood bearing more usefulness. It was originally planned for the game to feature more levels. In an interview with Retro Gamer magazine, Rare software developer Chris Sutherland explained that levels named Witchy World and Glitter Gulch Mine were originally put into the game, but were then removed. A Fire World was also created, but was removed altogether. These 3 missing levels would eventually make their debut, but not in 1998. Considering that Project Dream originally had voice acting, it seems bewildering that Banjo Kazooie bailed hardly any at all. This is even more confusing when considering that Banjo had a voice 1 year prior in Diddy Kong Racing.
I'm Banjo!
The only object to say anything within the entire game would be a flower pot, situated outside the church in Mad Monster Mansion.
Thank you.
This didn't take anything away from the game, however. Some games released by Nintendo even in 2011 still contain no voice acting, and they are praised as being some of the greatest games of all time. Instead, the voices were written dialogue, accompanied by the face of the character making appropriate or non-appropriate noises to signify that they were talking. Bob the Pirate, for example, would make a burping noise, whereas musical notes would sound like a tune. Almost everything within Banjo Kazooie talked, whether it be an orange, a cauldron, a bucket, an egg, or even a toilet. Although there were many different characters in Banjo Kazooie, there are only a few main characters. Banjo was a helpful, good-hearted honey bear, Kazooie was the smart-mouthed sidekick, Bottles the Mole granted new moves, Mumbo Jumbo transformed the duo into different forms, Gruntilda was the awful rhyming antagonist, Klungo was a servant, and Tooty was the damsel in distress. Depending on what creature you believe Gruntilda is, there was only one actual human being character within the entire game of Banjo Kazooie, and possibly the only character who didn't say anything. This character was a blonde woman walking down the beach sporting a red bikini and carrying a tray of melons during the very last scene of the game. It can't be denied that Banjo Kazooie bears a similar feel to Super Mario 64, incorporating razor-sharp controls. Stars have been replaced with jiggies, coins were now notes, and red coins were now Jinjos. However, Banjo Kazooie surpassed Super Mario 64 when it came to the gameplay because of the pure depth. Collectibles range from honeycomb pieces, red feathers, gold feathers, eggs, and different items needed to pass certain goals. 16 different moves were available in all, including firing eggs from front or back, fast running shoes, and even flying. The duos start with some basic moves, but then learn new ones as the game progresses, leaving the duo to occasionally backtrack and grab collectibles that were out of reach beforehand. The gameplay was put into even more depth when you weren't playing as a bear and bird at all. Collecting Mumbo tokens would grant you the ability to be transformed into different creatures, from a termite to a pumpkin, depending on which of the 9 worlds you were situated in. These creatures were a necessity in order to finish the game and collect, well, more collectibles. After battling through Gruntilda's lair and collecting the majority of just about everything the game had to offer, Banjo Kazooie took an obscure turn and turned from a platformer and into a quizmaster. After finishing every level, it was time for the final showdown, to win Banjo's sister back once and for all, but you wouldn't win her back in the traditional sense of a boss battle. Instead, Rare created a game show, with Gruntilda as the host, and it was Banjo and Kazooie's chance to win one of 3 prizes: a Gruntilda cuddly toy, a washing machine, and finally, Tooty's freedom. The game show wasn't for the faint-hearted, as enough incorrect answers would throw the duo into a lava-filled lake which the quiz floor floated over. In order to win the quiz, Banjo and Kazooie would have to move along the game board, answering specific questions within the category that the pair was stood on. These included a picture round, where a picture would be shown and the pair must select the correct location. A music round which would play either a level's music, a particular room's music, a collectible, or a character's voice. A correct answer would then be chosen. Joker cards could be collected by answering a random question correctly. These cards would enable the pair to skip a square. There were skull squares which resulted in instant death if the random question was answered incorrectly. The most demanding square on the board was the time round, which would transport the duo to an early part of the game and would start a timer for them to complete the challenge of either battling a boss or completing a puzzle. Banjo Kazooie squares asked general knowledge questions about the game just played through, and the final square was Gruntilda Square, which asked questions about Gruntilda's personal life. Only if Banjo had been paying attention to Gruntilda's sister within the lair would he know the answers. The quiz was a very unique aspect of the game and took around to the hour mark to complete. After winning the quiz, Tooty was free and Banjo was able to take his sister on an adventure. The game then ends and the credits roll, using a montage of almost all the characters encountered within the lair's worlds. Just when the game is over, Banjo and Kazooie are reminded at a barbecue party that Gruntilda is atop her lair, and the duo set off for the final showdown. In order to reach the final showdown, 94 of the 100 jigsaw pieces must be collected throughout the game. Additionally, right before the final showdown, an extra 4 note dolls were available, containing a giant egg, a giant red feather, and a giant gold feather, all of which doubled the amount of items that could be carried. The final note doll held host to the last jigsaw puzzle of the game, which needed 4 jigsaw pieces. The picture would reveal a honeycomb and the duo's health would be doubled. This meant that a total of 98 jigsaw pieces must be obtained throughout the game. Furthermore, in order to get through the final note door, 882 of 900 musical notes must be collected. This means that the duo must collect just over 98% of the collectibles within the game to progress with any hope of defeating the incredibly difficult final boss. After a lengthy battle, the bear and bird would summon the Gingernator, king of the Gingos, to finally defeat Gruntilda, knocking her off the top of her lair, leaving her buried alive under a massive boulder. The game was finally won and the characters were last seen on a tropical island. If every nook and cranny was collected within the game, Mumbo would then reveal a second video game in the series entitled Banjo Kazooie, and another shocking piece of information that would leave gamers puzzled for a decade to come. If Banjo and Kazooie collected all 100 jigsaw pieces and all 900 musical notes in the game, Mumbo Jumbo would then reveal the location of a pink Easter egg in Treasure Trove Cove, and a green Easter egg in Gobby's Valley. An ice key would also be revealed in Freezy Peak. Mumbo explains that these items were in connection with the sequel game, which wouldn't be released until late 2000 in North America and April 21st, 2001 in Europe, almost 3 years later. Gamers were confused by this concept that was named Stop and Swap. It was believed by many that the stop and swap items in question hold some connection to Rare's future release Donkey Kong 64, after one in particular menu showed the outline of an ice key. More evidence is given to why these games were connected, was that there is a portrait of Donkey Kong in Banjo's room and vice versa. Nothing was proved by these coincidences. It was then discovered that the hidden items could be collected using a cheat device or by inputting a password on the sandcastle floor in Treasure Trove Cove. 6 eggs and 1 ice key could be obtained, which would then open an extra menu entitled Stop and Swap, but the items did nothing. It was also discovered that in order for Stop and Swap to work, the player must collect the items in Banjo Kazooie and then switch the cartridge over to Banjo Tooie to unlock the secrets. Fans were confused when the sequel was finally released to find that Stop and Swap didn't work. More theories started to arise that Stop and Swap was cancelled because Nintendo wasn't sure whether other games besides the Banjo Kazooie series would be affected. Fans would have to wait until the HD remakes of the series released on Xbox Live Arcade to finally reveal the hidden secrets of Stop and Swap. Over a decade of intense rumours and unanswered questions were finally put to rest when it was revealed that the hardware inside the Nintendo 64 was changed when the second game was being made, making the switch impossible. It is also revealed that collecting the items would unlock a Jinjo to play as in multiplayer in the sequel, a new move and the ability to shoot homing eggs. A gamer picture for Xbox Live was unlocked along with a unique theme and downloadable content for Banjo's third entry into the series, Nuts and Bolts. Although Banjo Kazooie was highly known for its mysterious stop and swap feature, the game was also a commercial success, selling over 2.2 million copies. What Donkey Kong Country did for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Banjo Kazooie did for the Nintendo 64. The graphics were phenomenal at the time of release. Banjo Kazooie received high-scoring reviews, including a 9.5 from GameSpot's ex-employee Jeff Gershman, who stated that Banjo Kazooie was a great game that made logical progressions to the 3D platforming formula. The game was praised for its incredible music score, razor-sharp gameplay, hilarious gags, well-designed levels, and almost perfect difficulty level. For a new IP to stand alongside Super Mario, the king of the video game industry, it shows what a monumental achievement Banjo Kazooie was for Rare.